Welcome to Cockpit2Cowl, the show that explores general aviation safety topics from the combined perspective of flight instructors, pilots, and mechanics, exploring both pilot and aircraft topics to make aviation safer and more enjoyable. I'm Jeff Simon, pilot, AMP/IA, and president of SocialFlight.
I'm Brian Schiff, ATP, CFII, and MEI, airline pilot on the side to support my GA habits. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Excellent. Brian, we've got a really, I think, impactful show this evening. We're going to talk about blind faith in aviation safety and some of the major impacts that has. And before we get to that, I'd like to thank our friends over at Avemco because, so much of the information I think that we get behind the scenes that isn't in the NTSB reports really comes from our partnership with Avemco and seeing what is happening with claims and so many other things out there. And I'll tell you, that is a company that does so much to support education and aviation safety. I really think it has a significant impact on everything that we're doing. And so there's news out of that, of course, with all the great stuff that we get from them. There's another quick update where you can see there's some cool videos out there. We talked about, I think, the last show where we did some ice landings and other fun things, and you get to see that. That was all brought to by Michelin, and we'll talk tonight about some other topics that come on as well. But my understanding is from the things that we've talked about, this is a subject that is very near and dear to your heart, and so I'm going to toss it over to you, my friend.
Yeah, it really is. And I do want to echo your comments about Avemco because not just as a sponsor, but as friends and advocates of safety, they really do have their heart in the right place by sponsoring a lot of us who are aviation advocates, safety advocates, and they give us the information we need, which gives us a very good indication on the pulse of what's happening in the industry. Like you said, not everything is reportable to the NTSB, and the information that we find out, the stuff that, none of us want to have accidents, and the goal is to reduce accidents, even if it's just hangar rash or whatever. The more we can do, and they're motivated by that, and so are we. So I think that's why we're spending time here. But I do want to tell you, like you mentioned, it is near and dear to my heart, but I'm going to tell you I'm a little angry, Jeff. I'm angry that in 2026, we still have airplanes falling out of the sky for the stupidest, most preventable reasons in the book. I mean, pilots who stop taking the job seriously. We have bent metal, we have dead friends, not because the engine quit or not because the wing fell off, but because somebody climbed into an airplane the way most of us climb into our cars, casual, distracted, and completely unprepared for the what if. But I also want to be clear that those of you watching us tonight, you're not the problem. You're here. You gave up your time, all three of you. You chose to get uncomfortable. You chose to and hear these hard truths that we're going to talk about and sharpen your edge. You're motivated by the right thing. You're trying to be a safer pilot. The pilots I'm talking about are the ones who will never log into a webinar like this or never sit through a safety seminar. Avemco helps motivate them by offering better discount rate, discounted insurance premiums and wings credits. And in fact, they do offer the wings. I think Avemco provides the wings that pilots get when they complete a phase of wings. But people poo-poo that, and they never sit through a safety seminar or crack open a book or a pilot, POH, unless someone forces them to. They honestly believe that because nothing bad has happened to them yet, nothing bad will happen. And they rely on the fact that aviation is safe. And yes, I'm using air quotes because we say that, we rely on that all the time, that, hey, I like flying because flying is so much safer than driving. Well, that mindset is what fuels a lot of the accidents, and it normalizes skipping the pre-flight just this once, or flying into marginal weather, or dismissing rusty skills, because I've done this 1,000 times. And those pilots are not sitting in this virtual room today. So this is my ask of you. Don't let this session end with you. Think of the pilots you know who roll their eyes at safety talks, who joke about paperwork and the FAA paranoia, who treat every flight like a casual commute. Call them, take them to coffee, share a story that shook you, and invite them personally to the next seminar, webinar, the next hangar flying session that actually talks about risk. And because I'm angry as I am, I also believe this: the only people who can reach complacent pilots are the non-complacent pilots they respect. And that's you guys for being here and watching us and trying to learn. And if each of you just pulls one pilot or two, a few inches back from the edge this hour together, will have been worth every second that we spend together. So let's dive in. Let's talk about this particular accident. Let's talk about blind faith, Jeff. I mean, how many times have you used the words aviation is safe? It's statistically safe, to try and convince somebody that it's not to be scared.
Well, that's always what you're doing, right? We're not saying that to each other. We're saying that to people we want to convince and we want to be comfortable flying with us. And I want to add something to what you said, and I don't want to take anything away from, as you mentioned, our audience and people that do attend so many kind of recurrent training things. But the reality is we use this phrase of like, that could happen to the best of us. And we've seen this. We saw this with SPAD, Richard McSpadden and his accident. We see it with others. And so I sort of feel like it's either a continuum or there is just multiple categories of folks out there, because I don't put myself or you know, even you or other people that I have the utmost respect for above the pressures that cause mistakes to happen and bad decision making. I think we just have to be vigilant. We have to keep learning. We are above by engaging in continuing education, by trying to by perceiving a problem, perceiving weakness, and trying to address and become better pilots and educate ourselves. We're certainly putting ourselves at an advantage compared to like who we want to reach by spreading the word. But I don't think it ends there. I think it's a tough road to get better about it. And that's I credit being friends with you to becoming a better pilot myself, and much of that is that little kind of whispering of like, oh, maybe I'll call Brian and see what he thinks about this.
Well, I love that.
It doesn't mean I don't have the same tendencies I'm fighting to make poor decisions.
We all do, and nobody's perfect. And I've made poor decisions. I've been lucky enough to learn from them. And I think we all have a few of those that we can talk about. But yeah, like you mentioned, gosh, that could happen to me. You know, when you hear a story like that, or a pilot that you respect and have the utmost respect for. And that's why I'm a little bit afraid to call out, this issue, because, but for the grace of God go I, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to jinx myself by saying this, but sometimes I have just a little bit enough nervousness to think ahead, like, okay, I'm flying over mountains at night. What can I do to stack the deck in my favor, rather than just get in, turn the key, and go straight, direct whatever's underneath me is underneath me, I don't care. That's the kind of attitude that we do see in a lot of the people that are crashing airplanes, except for those who are, there's always the exception, like our friend Spad, and those kind of things we just hate to hear about. And I lost a friend, we lost a great guy recently, which I think is what kind of the straw that broke my camel's back on this topic, that here is some outstanding pilots, and how does this happen? I mean, sometimes, like Bob Hoover said, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, stuff happens, and that's unfortunate. But we can stack the deck in our favor, and aviation inherently is risky. It's dangerous. There are some things about it that, if not handled properly by the pilot and by the mechanics, we make it safe. You and I, as pilots and mechanics, take something that could have a lot of risk involved and make it extremely safe if we do everything right.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what we're talking about.
So I'd like to get started, and I'll reference that my latest AOPA article, the AOPA online maintenance article, is on expectation bias and the dangers of that. From a maintenance perspective is really where I was coming from. It's an expectation bias and optimism bias. And these are biases where we sort of buy into wishful thinking, or we buy into what we want to happen, or what we expect to happen or to see, and we tend to kind of write things off in that regard. And there's a few cases of this that I wanted to bring up for us to discuss. One of them that comes up is this idea, for instance, of like dead batteries. This is one of the most common ones that I see from a maintenance perspective, where someone will leave a master on, run the battery down, and then either jump start, which is a terrible idea, and go flying,
Yeah.
absolutely atrocious idea, or charge the battery and just decide it's okay and go from there. So
Which
we
is
have
what I used to do, but for what I learned from you. And that was a very valuable lesson for me because I was the guy that did that all the time. I don't do that anymore. I didn't know
I
what
th-
you're about to say.
I think in your case, it's an example probably of like you really care and want to do the right thing, and it was more about having the information. I think so. Here's the reality. The reality is that if you discharge a battery beyond a certain point, in most cases it's like below 9 volts, especially RG batteries, recombinant gas batteries, the more modern ones. If you get below a certain voltage, you've permanently damaged, in most cases, that battery. You no longer have the capacity you used to have. Now, how degraded is it? You don't know. It depends how low it got. It depends how long it was there. Cells within there, cell plates, reverse polarity, dendrites form. There's all sorts of things that happen in there that cause a lot of damage to the battery. And batteries are expensive, and therefore we want to believe that it's okay now. Like, we charged it, we screwed up. I don't, especially if a battery isn't handy and you need to get home or something like that, then you really want to believe it's just okay now.
Yeah. I don't know how
And
many times I've done that, get a jump start, because they have the little plug that you can do that with, or ground power. It's not really made for jump starting.
exactly, it's supposed to be ground power to preserve your battery, not.
Yeah, but then I'll charge it on the way home. I got a 2-hour flight. It should charge the whole way there, right?
Well, see, that's the thing, right? I don't want to dive too far down this one topic or one example, but batteries are a perfect example of that, playing right into that optimism bias or that expectation bias, this idea. Because if you have a battery that's in bad shape, you can charge it all the way up and you can go and start the plane, and it'll comply.
Yeah.
It'll act like you want it to act. And then you're flying along, well, you're charging at the same time you're flying. That's fine, but that's not what the battery's for. The battery is for when that alternator goes out, especially at night or in an emergency situation or an IMC, and now you're relying on the battery instead of the alternator or the engine to produce that power. And or your engine fails and now you're back on the battery. Whichever thing causes that charging system to go down, you're on that battery, and you'll find that all of a sudden a battery that should have been good for an hour, for 2 hours, for whatever, is got like 10 minutes in it for you. And you don't know that unless you test it, unless you capacity test it. And people just don't like doing that. Mechanics, a lot of mechanics don't have the machinery, the tools to do it, and people just like to avoid it. And it's a perfect example of just like, ugh, you just want to believe something's good, and so you avoid it.
So I've done that. So let's say you're out on a trip, and you're at a non-towered, very low, no maintenance airport, and you left the battery on overnight. You come out to a dead battery, and someone says, "Yeah, we can help you get it started." You get the engine started. It's day VFR, an hour flight home. I would venture to wager that most people, and I would be very tempted myself, if it's day VFR, what's the worst that could happen? Is the worst that could happen is that I lose all my, like if I lose my alternator, I have no electricity? Is that
Well,
it?
so like let's put a couple other accident examples together, or issues together really quickly, and
Okay.
then talk about how do you solve it, because it's the same solution, I think, to all of them.
Okay.
And we can revisit the things I'm going to bring up, but they're the similar cases, and then I want to go really quickly just to what you do, and then we can go back.
Okay.
So an example is, there was another one. There's a place that I was recently where someone landed. They taxied in flat tire, and it wasn't like low. It was like womp womp, like when they stopped, the wheel was sandwiched. It was only rubber, right? There was no air left in that thing. And I was watching this. I did end up chatting with them, but they put air in the tire, and my position was, you don't fly that. I just don't care what it does. You don't fly it. We didn't explain why the air left the tire. We didn't.
Yeah.
You're talking about if it lands like that, I don't know, whatever. Something is wrong. It didn't miraculously go away. So, but there's this idea of like hope. I wanted to. So unfortunately, it got air in. They like monitored it. The air didn't go right back out. So they took off. They left. I don't know how the story ended, but again, it's this, we're influencing, we're not looking at facts, we're influencing things by the way we want. And there was an accident, there's two accidents, well, one I'll talk about right now that had to do with this. There was an aircraft that there was an NTSB report not long ago, this was about a year ago, that was flying and had a rough engine, got very rough. Pilot asked to divert to a nearby airport, and as they were going to that near airport, the engine smoothed out. What did the pilot do? Pilot decided to go back on to their original destination.
Oh man.
And he didn't make it. So without diving into all those right now, it's the same thing. It's this idea that we're applying our desire instead of our brain and our logic. And I think if we can tackle this with a systemic approach that just says, I am going to acknowledge what's happening out loud, what is really going on here. And then that's number one, is be honest about it, and be honest about the fact that you want to go, even though you're at risk of this. Like, you're human. Acknowledge you're human, and you might be under pressure from yourself, and you might make a bad decision. And then number two is like to lay out the facts. And do these facts really add up, or is something a little fishy here? And then number three is, okay, well, what's the risk I'm really taking? And lay it out and be honest about it. What's the worst case scenario if this doesn't work? And then lastly, what's my plan that I'm going to accept if I'm going to do anything? And be willing to say it out loud. So in that case, if it's day VFR and you've got that dead battery and someone offered to jumpstart it, you go down that path. All right, I know I'm making a decision largely because I want to get home. I know there's a pretty good chance this battery's really actually fried and won't be there for me when I need it. What's the real risk? Well, it's day VFR. If the battery goes, I'm not going to lose. I may lose my ability to communicate. I'm not going to, do I have a backup radio? Yeah, okay. All right, I've got a backup radio. I'm not going to lose my ability to land or for the engine to be okay. It's totally VFR. Just acknowledge exactly what the risk is you're taking, and then be willing to say it out loud, including to your passengers. Hey guys, here's the deal. We have a bad battery, or we could. We don't need it to fly, but lay it all out so everyone can acknowledge the risk and be informed, and you're honest about it. I think that's the best scenario you can have. And hopefully if you do that, you'll also often come to the decision not to go.
I agree. I think that's fantastic, and I actually love the fact you're talking about it, because this is the soft stuff that I often get accused of. Hey, this isn't in any book. It is in more books nowadays. Get homeitis, we know about that. We learn about all these things, but I really do like that article. I encourage everybody watching here to read that article. I also use your article. That very same article is in the course resources of this Thursday's the next Schiff show. Because we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I do really like how you don't just tell it the problem, you actually offer some mitigation steps like you just did. One of which is to ask yourself, am I ignoring the facts? And just asking yourself, am I ignoring the facts? That, and out loud, is another great piece of advice, because you tend to listen to yourself. You can't listen to a silence, but you can listen to yourself when you talk. And including your passengers is fantastic. I do that at the airline. Folks, this thing's broken. Do you guys want to go without it? No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. But if you ever hear yourself say the words, and I've heard people say this, it'll probably be okay. Wait, what? So what if I ask you, are you going to survive this flight? Well, probably. I'll probably
or you don't, you're right, or you don't say it out loud, or you don't say, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I think your advice is sound. It's fantastic. And most of the time you'll reach the correct decision if you just slow down and go through the process like you just described.
I personally had this happen, and had it happen where it did not work out, but it was okay. I had a situation where there was an alternator that was just having an issue I couldn't really nail down, and it was coming online late, and then it would be stable. And I had a trip to make, and I looked at same thing as what you said. It was absolutely VFR. It was all these things, and I couldn't reproduce. I knew exactly what this situation was. So I decided to weigh it all out, look at that, and ended up, since again, during testing, it was working, it was airworthy. I laid all that out and looked at it and said, okay, what's the downside? And as I went down every single item, they all came back safe, but not ideal. And then I included my passenger and said, look, this is the situation. There's a good chance, or a possible chance, I said, not a good chance. There is a chance that we get to our destination and we have to drive back. We're stuck. Do you still want to go? There's no safety issue. We're not putting our lives at risk. There's no airworthiness. But if this thing that, you know, has been, you're giving me issues we can't seem to solve, actually decides to you know, die, we're going to be fine, but we may be stuck. And we went on the trip and we got stuck.
Well, accepting that fact ahead of time is, I think, a very huge step.
It kept us out of a safety. We weren't in a safety issue, but it acknowledged it. And when I think about these other cases I just talked to you about, if we sat there, if someone had said to themselves, all right, I have no idea how all the air went out of this tire, and I didn't do any work to it other than put more air in. Therefore, that's magical thinking. There's a high risk that something we know something's wrong. Now, what happens if it magically happens again between here and my home base, since I don't want to do it here?
Right.
Well, I could swerve off the runway and destroy my plane. People could get hurt. If you talk about it that way, would you take the risk? And if you said to your passenger, hey, here's the deal. I know you don't like the idea that we're an hour away and we'd have to drive or something like that, or whatever it is. But here's the deal. You know, we don't know how it happened. It wasn't magic. And there's a good chance that if the air does also go out on our way home, that we crash. Who's going to say go for it?
Right, right. And these things, like you said, they didn't magically happen. Something mechanical happened to cause this failure, to cause the air to be out of the tire, to cause the battery. Now, the battery, if you know you left the battery switch on, yes, you can explain it away. Doesn't justify it. But if you can't explain why something happened, I think you want to figure it out before trusting the airplane.
Right. Or the other case that we mentioned, right? Like, wow, that we were just scared. That engine was running really rough. Look, I don't know why the engine was running rough, but it was quite rough. So we can land at that airport over here, or we can go another, 30 minutes and get to our destination. So here's the deal. We have no idea why that was happening.
Yeah.
And if it goes south, we're going to crash. Would you rather, say it out loud? Why would you continue if you're really acknowledging it and having a discussion with your passenger?
Yeah, totally agree. How is it that we become complacent? I mean, we get homeitis, we get, okay, I'm justifying it, but the complacency is something that I really want to try to battle. And how is it that, both pilots and mechanics become complacent because everything's worked out so well so far, I guess. And how is it that we keep that from happening? Because I mean, if you've flown thousands of hours with nothing going wrong, you're going to become complacent. And I think studying accidents, seeing what can happen is a big part of that, to realize and hearing about things that happen to other people that you respect, people you regard as great pilots. I think studying and becoming a student of that will keep the complacency down, and it's important to do that. So,
yeah,
I mean, how many people do you know? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I cut you off. How many people do you know, of all the people you know, how many do you know that were killed in car accidents? What percentage of all the people you know were killed in car accidents?
I don't think I don't know if I don't know if I know someone who was killed in a car accident, but I can tell you I can count way too many people.
So of that same denominator of people you know, there's probably more than one hand, maybe two, of people I know gotten hurt in an airplane accident, an airplane crash, and
Mhm.
so it's proof to me that there is some risk there. There's some danger. It may not be as safe as we're touting to everybody, but we can stack the deck in our favor and make it that safe if we don't fly an airplane with a flat tire, we don't fly an airplane that has a battery that's about to go out, or when it talks to us and starts shaking, we take that seriously. Even if it corrects itself, something made it shake. That's a good reason. And if the shaking goes away momentarily, take that as a gift, use it to get to that nearest airport. You'd always rather land under power before that engine fails. Totally.
Brian, how do you apply this to regular risks that we take while flying that aren't the weather or the something else, but the idea of making a decision to fly a healthy single engine aircraft at night, making the decision to fly it at night over inhospitable terrain, although I would argue where I live, it's all inhospitable terrain at night.
Yeah.
Um, over water portions, things like that. I mean, I know I make these decisions and I accept them in my life. I go to
Yeah.
Oshkosh and I go across the water. I don't go down and around. These are decisions I acknowledge and I acknowledge
Yeah.
the risk of, but they come very much at a risk.
Sure. And so what you're talking about is risk versus reward. What's the risk versus what do I get out of it? It's like flying. I used to say flying to Catalina Airport out on the West Coast. It's the airport, they call it airport in the sky. It's up on a bluff, and there's a cliff on each side, inhospitable terrain. It's at 1,600 feet elevation, where the town of Avalon is down at sea level. It's beautiful. The airport has and there's some risk involved in flying to that airport, because if anything happens shortly after takeoff, there's really nowhere to go. That's the risk. The reward is they serve buffalo burgers at the restaurant on the airport, and those are fantastic. So if something goes wrong, is it worth the buffalo burger? And hands down, yes. But you also have to look at the odds. So you have to compare the odds of something happening to the level of catastrophe that will happen if it does. If it's totally catastrophic and unsurvivable, it doesn't take much odds for me to say no. If the odds are pretty slim, like you say, flying at night over inhospitable terrain, something happens, I lose my engine when I can't see the terrain and it's rough terrain, that's going to be pretty catastrophic. So the risk better be pretty low for something like that. So how can I make the risk low? I can stack the deck in my favor by making sure I'm not going to do it in an airplane that just came out of annual.
Right.
I'm not going to do it if I haven't flown in a long time. I'm not going to do it if the winds are gusty or beyond, or the weather is anywhere out of my limits. So you're basically narrowing down and getting rid of all the things that make it risky, that increase the odds of something happening. I'm certainly not going to skip my pre-flight on that flight. I wouldn't skip a pre-flight on any flight, but that is the one where I might double down on my pre-flight and look twice at everything. I might make sure that everything is working, that it looks right, that my fuel's not contaminated. Speaking of that, there's another accident we should talk about. But so you can stack the deck in your favor by increasing the odds in your favor. The odds of something catastrophic happening are very low in the airplane. Like I said, most of our accidents are from something the pilot did or didn't do. And leaving the odds to just something mechanical failing, well, then you got to look at the airplane. You got to trust your mechanic. And if you're going to fly an airplane over inhospitable terrain at night, I think it's good to have some faith in the airplane by knowing your mechanic, overseeing the maintenance that happens on it, and being a part of it, so that you can have the confidence to fly it like in those situations.
Yeah. I'd add one thing, a subtlety about that. You mentioned about like if I haven't flown in a while,
Yeah.
then that's a really, really important one. I also think the proximity to the last time that the aircraft flew is huge.
Yeah.
There's a big difference to me looking at the mechanical nature of risk. There's a
Yeah.
big difference between if you flew in the morning and you therefore have this currency of knowing how the engine was running, how the airplane was operating, how everything was going, in addition to a pre-flight. That to me, that return flight at night, the risk is really dropped. It just keeps dropping because there's that recency of that aircraft proving itself to you. That's
a
different
fantastic.
than
Yeah.
going out and it's and you haven't and the aircraft itself hasn't moved in 2 weeks.
That's
Or
fantastic. I'm going to add that to my routine.
or worse, someone else is the last one to fly it,
Oh
and
yeah,
so therefore
yeah.
you don't have your, if it's not your own plane, you don't have the knowledge of how it was, because now you're starting to say it's like that over water, over, auto rough thing. Like, what's the odds that we've got a 15-mile stretch here of we can't glide somewhere? Is this
Middle.
really, what's the odds this is really the time that the engine decided to act up?
Yeah.
It's sort of like that. I think there's pre-flight's important. Currency of the aircraft is also really important.
Yeah, and paying very close attention during the run-up and as well. That's part of the pre-flight. Be prepared to go back and not fly if something doesn't seem right. If your engine is talking to you. You even gave me a hint, like there was something like when your engine starts and then shuts down right away. Something that was a sign of a sticky valve. I wish I could remember it. What did you tell me?
They call it morning sickness. It's
Yeah,
for Lycoming, and that one's for Lycoming engines. There's
which I
there's
have.
differences between Lycoming and Continental engines and things. I think one of the things from a mechanics perspective, from looking at it from the aircraft failing you instead of the pilot,
Yeah.
the things that I think are important is for people to sort of have a personal list of the what will kill me list,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Because not everything's in that list. That battery's not going to be it, right? Unless you're flying IMC or at night, and now all of a
Agreed.
sudden you don't have the battery when you need it. What's really going to do it to you the most? Anything with your propeller, anything that is going to be potentially stopping an engine. On a Lycoming, that's absolutely related to sticking valves. On a Continental, it can be burning valves. So if you regularly borescope and you're looking at that, then the likelihood that something's going to burn within 25 hours of your last look at it is very low. Those types of things. And on Lycoming, as you mentioned, you start it up, and if the valves are sticking when the engine is cold, the valves will occasionally stick and it'll run a little rough, but once it warms up and the clearances increase between the valve stem and the valve guide, then all of a sudden it'll smooth out. And that goes right back to that bias. The bias that we have is it was rough, it's better now, everything's okay. And everything's not okay. An engine shouldn't do that. Oh, well, it
That
just
was
does
in
that when it warms up, or it just whatever. Like, no.
Yeah, that was an ignorance factor that I had on the flight that I had. And I know I've told you about this, where I lost a cylinder because it threw a valve. And it did that when I started it. This airplane is known. It's kind of cantankerous when you start it. It runs rough, but it smooths right out. And we justified it. And that's creeping normalcy. Like this
Mhm.
airplane does that all the time, and it's okay. And then if it does it a little bit worse the next time, it creeps and pushes until the point where someone like me gets in and I lose my cylinder.
Mhm.
And that was a very violently rough engine that I had to pull it back to as low power as I could. It was still shaking pretty badly, and I just pointed straight at the closest end of the runway and said, I need to land the wrong way. I don't care if I have a tailwind. I got it on the ground right away. I don't know how long it can run like that, but if I'd have
Yeah.
pushed it and took it really wide around, I mean, would an engine like that behave for a while?
In many cases, no. And the reason is because we like to think of our engines as kind of four independent cylinders,
Yeah.
that you lose one and the others are fine. But I have seen cases with that where the valve sticks wide open and is then hit by the piston, and then debris goes from one cylinder through the intake into other cylinders and takes out the rest of it. This isn't a myth. I've seen the pictures. I've seen this happen. And so when something goes bad, you get on the ground. Period. Period. I mean, that's
And do so. I think like I would take a field that I know is flat and I can land in it if I feel comfortable with that field before stretching it to an airport. And I've done this when I had an oil problem. So what do? You get oil pressure dropping and we're going to talk about this some more on Thursday night as well, but oil pressure is dropping. That's the only thing you see. Okay, am I going to wait and fly a lot? No. I mean, I see that first red flag, I want to get it on the ground while I've got power. And how many cases are there of somebody who, like you said, had wishful thinking and the engine's running fine? The oil pressure is just a little bit low. Well, now accompany that with high oil temperature. It's going up. Those two signs together are telling you something very important.
Yeah.
And that temperature is not going to stop rising, right? You need to take that seriously.
Just like a propeller, as I mentioned, oil is right up at the top of that list. That's if I see an oil pressure variation, not like this, but I mean something where my oil pressure is dropping or is low in any way, I am immediately accepting that this engine is gone. This engine's done. It is just a question of what I've got left in it, but it's done, because without oil, forget it. And so it's a matter, in my case, I would pull the power back, and then you're identifying a place to land. And at that point, you can make whatever decision you think is important. You pull the power back because the engine will last longer and live longer on low oil pressure at lower RPMs with lower torques and pressures internally on the components and the bearings. And you can't do a one case fits all for this, right? I mean,
right.
If there's a field below me and a mountain between me and the airport, I'm going to land in the field. Right. If I'm flying over the middle part of the country and it's all fields, then maybe I'm going to try to get to the airport and see what happens during that. I don't know.
But even with that, wouldn't you want, like I would want it, because you're stressed, what are the chances you might misjudge the approach and be just a little bit low? I think they're pretty good. It could happen. And when that happens, if it happens, I would want to have a little bit of power there to just boost it, just to keep me and get me to that field and not hit the power line or not hit the row of trees or house or whatever. I would rather have something than nothing. And that's why
I agree. And the reason I'm not kind of going to exactly one answer is because in that unique case, you have a gauge in front of you. Right. So it just depends what it is. If my engine feels like it's running off of the mounts, I'm just picking a field. There's no question. If I'm watching it come down, I'm going to have to make a decision. I'm going to have to make some type of a take on that calculated risk, because that pressure is on that gauge is my life, is how much time I have. And so if I still see 15 on it or something like that, then I think I've got enough to give it that last thing to get me in. But if I don't, no, forget it. I'm just picking a field.
So any kind of guidance, or can you not say, is every engine different or every scenario different? How long can an engine run when it hits zero?
Well, once it hits zero, realistically, you've got a few minutes in many cases. You just don't have much.
I think that's good to know.
If you really, it's so hard to answer, because I mean, what is zero really? You're saying zero. I mean, I guess if you're really at zero and your windshield's covered in oil, you're at very low settings. You could have up to 10 minutes, let's say, or something. At a high power setting, you've got very little time. Probably could even be less than a minute.
I think to always assume the worst is going to be conservative. Land under power. Don't. If I saw a forest with trees and I know I'm going to hit the canopy of trees or something, then you're going to have to. You got to evaluate. What are your choices? What are the options? A field certainly makes it easy. But I don't want to tell everybody that it's an obvious answer. Like you said, every case has a unique situation to it, for sure.
I think, going to the topic title of Blind Faith in Aviation Safety, the idea here, more than anything, is we want to be honest with ourselves. We want to be honest with ourselves. You should be honest with your mechanic. That happens a lot, as not, I know it would seem that people want to bring every squawk to their mechanic, but I'll tell you they don't. There's a lot of things they sort of don't want, and they just want it to pass annual.
Is it money?
Fuel's a big one, right? Wet wings, Grumman owners, Mooney owners, anybody that has to deal with, really pain in the butt types of things. I've seen them clean up all the blue before it goes into annual. Why? Because they want to get through their annual. I mean, you
should want to get that fixed. The motivation should be to get everything in tip-top shape. And that's how you stack the deck in your favor and not have faith in the fact that nothing has happened so far, so nothing will happen. But I think I also want to address, like, how many, like Richard McSpadden's accident, like another accident that I'm going to talk about on Thursday, if they hadn't put the gear down, they'd have made it to the runway. And so a little piece of information that I just want to make sure everybody who flies a retractable gear airplane knows: how long does it take your gear to get down in a normal situation? Now, it could vary, I guess, if you don't have your engine running, right? It depends on how your system works. But I would like to know, if my airplane, how long does it take to get the gear down under the worst situation, scenario, whatever? And maybe if I'm not going to make the field, if I don't have it totally assured, I'm not going to put the gear and flaps down. It just seems like that gets a lot of pilots in trouble.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. You got to know your plane for sure, and then you just got to do what you can to try to I think mitigate your own tendencies to want a better outcome that isn't realistic.
Right. And I think, like we said, aviation can be extremely safe. The statistics are there because most pilots and mechanics are doing the right thing. And there's overlap between pilots and mechanics as well. And if we miss something, hopefully the mechanic will get it. The final report just came out in that GA7, that Grumman American 7 that crashed. Yeah, and it was kind of a shame, but I think the final report, the NTSB said that the probable cause, and I find this interesting because I don't have it in front of me, but it was basically shared between pilot and mechanic. The NTSB said that the probable cause of this accident is the pilot's inadequate pre-flight inspection, which resulted in a loss of engine power due to water-contaminated fuel, and his subsequent loss of control. Contributing to the accident was the inadequate annual maintenance inspection, during which maintenance personnel failed to detect and replace the missing right fuel cap gasket. Well, yep. These are things, I mean, I pinned this on the pilot. The pilot should have caught the fact that there's water in the fuel. If only there was a way we could test it to see, And this happens a lot. How many times do you see a pilot go fly an airplane without checking the fuel, especially like a Comanche 250? You ever fly one of those?
I have not flown a Comanche 250.
Well, so
if you're up in New England and you want to take me up in one, let me know.
It's a fun airplane. It's a great airplane, but boy, testing the fuel is a pain. There's, like one.
Oh, that's one with like 7 drains. I think Brian Turner has one of those.
It's one drain at the bottom, but you've got to go back in the airplane, switch a valve, drain it, go back to the bottom and sump it, then go back in the cockpit. And actually, it's the back seat behind the 2 front seats. Switch a valve, go back underneath, drain some more. It's center between the 2 main gears. So not only is it you have to go in and out a lot, but you got to go. It's hard to get to. You see a lot of pilots, blow that off. And boy, that's just dangerous. In this case, there was water in the fuel, and it was there because there was no gasket on the fuel cap.
And I think, if I remember correctly, in that Cougar accident, they noted also that the aircraft had recently had an extensive rebuild. And so, meaning someone like refurbished it or did some major restoration work, and not just the engine. And so, when you go through that, you I think introduce an enormous amount of risk. Anytime that you do major surgery on something, it's not the idea that what you're doing is invasive per se, it's the scope of the work. In this case, I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe those are umbrella caps that have that flat washer that's underneath it, and on that specific aircraft.
I'm not sure.
And in you know, how does this happen? We can write the script for this, right? You're doing a million things, and those don't just walk away. Someone saw it probably in poor condition and took it off so they could go buy a new one while this thing's sitting in the shop. And along with the 1,500 other things they did to the plane, they forgot.
Right.
And
And the
it
NTSB.
just got put back on. Oh, let me take it off. Let me take the rubber thing off. Let me put the cap back on.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to go, I'll get a replacement. It's one of the things I'm doing during this big project. Now, I don't know that that's what happened, but the script writes itself.
Right.
And
Right.
it just adds up. Well, then that led to, it got missed on the annual inspection. Should it be missed on the annual inspection? Of course not. Like, not at all. But it also shouldn't be missed on a pre-flight. It also shouldn't be missed on any time you're fueling the plane.
Right. Look at your fuel gauge, fuel caps. You know what they should look like. Look at both of them. Make sure they're the same, because odds are it's not both of them.
Feel the same going on.
They should feel the same. But I think that in this case, let's say nobody caught the gasket. Okay, fine. But now we've got, it's like a chain of events, the accident chain. Not checking the fuel and testing for water. I mean, that would have done it. Boy, I keep having all this water in this tank? Well, you drain it all out, you just solved a lot of the problem. You're probably not going to have that engine failure. But also, if you try to investigate, why is there water in this tank all the time? I think any mechanic, if I came and said, my airplane sits outside in the rain and there's always water in the right tank.
I can tell you as a mechanic, if you came to me and said, I've been getting a lot of water in my tank, the first place I'm going is to your fuel cap.
Is that right? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Number one, right?
It cop-passed both of them. And I think that, there's overlap for a reason. We don't want to rely on the other, but it's a good safety net. But why do we not check our fuel? Why do we not notice that the fuel cap was missing? I'm being hard on the pilot, and I want to be careful because this could easily happen to me. It could easily happen to you. It could easily happen to any of us watching this, but let's learn from it. Let's remember that it happened and take a lesson from it.
Well, these types of things can have terrible consequences. There's an incident also that I refer to in my article, and it was a mechanic, really, truly wonderful human being, that someone brought to him an aircraft that had more than one in-flight engine stoppage, and then they had to dead stick it in, and they couldn't get it to reproduce on the ground.
More than one in flight?
Yeah.
In one flight?
Yeah.
In the same
No,
flight?
meaning like it had flown in the pattern and then the engine stopped. And they landed safely, I think threw some parts at the problem, tried to figure it out, couldn't reproduce it on the ground. And
I hate those.
Yeah, so this was a really, really tough situation because it happened. The mechanic sincerely believed he had identified the problem, although could not reproduce it, but found I think, sort of smoking gun, meaning components he didn't like or something like that weren't operating the way they should have, let's say. Replaced it, went and flew, and then it like climb out, the engine stopped again, and there was no hospitable terrain in front, and the pilot and the mechanic who was doing the test flight was he didn't perish, but he was very, very seriously injured.
Oh man.
And this was this case of like, what do you do? This isn't. There's no disrespect meant to this person. I think they're a good mechanic, but it's that bias. It's our. What do? We can't reproduce it. Okay, I can't get this thing to reproduce, but I know that it died. And so you find something, you convince yourself that this was the problem. Well, at that point, you got to decide where am I, for example.
Yeah.
I may have to make some really hard decisions that may make no sense in the normal world. Like, you know what? I think this was it, but since we absolutely can't reproduce it, we're taking the wings off and we're not going to do this at a 2,500-foot strip. We're going to take this to this other, 6,000-foot strip, and that's where we're going to be testing it.
It makes a lot of sense. It's also difficult to make a decision like that without the benefit of hindsight, like we're using right now.
I can't imagine making that decision myself, so I'm not trying to throw stones.
Yeah, right.
But my God, look at what happened.
Yeah.
And
it's awful.
Either that or you sit there and you go, until I can reproduce this plane's not leaving. Before you replace a part. I don't know what else to do.
Right. Yeah,
but
that's I don't like that.
Take that approach of I believe and not run the risks and accept them. That doesn't work. That winds up with terrible consequences.
And the buck has to stop a lot of times with the pilots, because sometimes, we'll, even at the airline, we'll have a failure, something that goes wrong. We write it up, get on the ground, the mechanic cannot reproduce, ops checked okay, signed off. The next captain gets in there and he's going to look at the logbook and sees, oh, this the rudder computer failed and now it works after landing and the ops checked okay. And then I take it for a flight and it happens to me. That's a repeat item. And I write it up, and then it gets on the ground somewhere, and the mechanic says, I can't reproduce it. Ops checked okay. It passed its bite test. They do these computer bite tests, and it passed, so I can't reproduce it. Ops checked okay, and are signed off again. The pilot at some point has to say no, timeout. Okay, and that's where the pilot in command has the option to say, well, I'm not flying this airplane until it's fixed. And that's what I did in this case. I refused the airplane. I said, I'm not flying it until we explain why this is happening. We got to figure this out. Of course, we happened to be in Cozumel, and darn the luck we got stuck there. That makes the decision a little bit easier. But sometimes it just has to land with the pilot to say no.
Yeah, I think, one of the differences, you've done some wonderful presentations and education on this subject, but it has to do with standard operating procedures, right? Because you, at the airlines, have this idea that whatever that computer was that failed and then tested okay, there must have been something in your standard procedures that said that's acceptable. But if an engine, for example, had completely failed,
right,
and then they can't reproduce it, I can't imagine they're going to dispatch that.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. In Part 121, that wouldn't be allowed to continue. For sure. There are a lot of cases, however, that, yes, the SOPs allow for it. For example, I was working a flight from Philadelphia to Seattle, not a short flight, in an Airbus 321, and written up was the forward lavatory. Okay, 200 people, 3 lavatories. We take one out of commission. The MEL says, yeah, you can go with 1 lavatory inoperative. Am I going to do that? Again, what's the worst thing that could happen? It's pretty gross. Also, I have to break some security protocols, so the crew's going to have to do the walk of shame all the way to the back of the airplane. So are our first class passengers, who paid a lot of money to be up there. The front half of the airplane, basically, they all got to go to the back. If we have turbulence, there's going to be people waiting. We can't get it done as quick. Long story short, I said, no, I'm not doing that. And nobody gave me a hard time. But a decision was made because this just doesn't make sense in this scenario. Now, would I fly that airplane, from St. Louis to Kansas City? Yeah, all day long. So each scenario is different. What is the worst? Just like you said earlier, I think this is a fantastic method. Read Jeff's article. There's actually, it's in our course resources. Your article is in our course resources for the next Schiff show this Thursday. But what is the worst thing that could happen? Ask yourself a certain set of questions. Am I willing to accept that? In this scenario, no. So you don't go. But I think asking yourself those questions and going through that thought process, that thought exercise, is a fantastic resource.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope to learn from it myself and start implementing that a little bit better. But again, for everybody listening, the idea first is outright acceptance that you have these biases and what they are, and saying to yourself that you have it, and then acknowledging what the situation is, acknowledging next what the facts are, and are any of these things that you're telling yourself don't make sense outright, acknowledge it, look, there's no question that
Right.
the air didn't magically leave the tire.
Yeah.
Right?
And if you want to
It's
reinforce
acknowledged.
this, yeah, we'll be looking at your article this Thursday. We'll reinforce it on episode 15 in case this is after the fact and you're watching the recording. But we'll be talking about engine failures and how to prevent, recognize, and cope with it. So.
And then lastly, yeah, I think everybody should have their own "what can kill me" list. I think that's really important. And
Right.
and I'm not trying to be crazy about this. Of course, like a flight control disconnection can do that, but that's not what's really likely. Like the real "what can kill you" list, we're talking about anomalies that just show up while you're flying, and the more
Right.
likely case of these things are, again, propeller, oil, something with directly with the engine, major electrical system if you're talking about night or IMC flying. I mean, these are the types of things you need to look at and say, landing gear, that could
Anything that
spin you off
turns.
the runway into an object. These are the things we need to look at and say, and oil. And you mentioned oil also when it came to people's bias around oil leaks.
Hmm. Yeah, there were some airplanes that I wouldn't fly if they weren't leaking, because that means it's out of, like the ND80. That would mean it's out of oil if it's not leaking. Some radial engines have a tendency to leak, but there's a certain amount that's okay and not okay for that engine. In fact, a lot of jet engines, if we have a leak, the mechanic will ask me, "What's the drip rate? What's the rate it's dripping? How often is it dripping?" And then I'm like, "Really?" But yeah, so every scenario is different. But I don't think you should accept a GA airplane with a belly covered with oil. I think
No.
there's something wrong. We shouldn't accept that. Find out what's happening.
And when you find out what's happening, a lot of times this is a team effort with your mechanic. You can find
Right.
out that it's coming out the breather and it's due to worn rings, and that is absolutely not a risk of safety right now, and say no problem. In this case, the mechanic could look at it, could tell you, look, I think it's safe. You're just
Right.
pissing out a lot of oil. Don't worry about it. And then Lycoming engines especially, you can have case hab leaks and things like that. These are things that if you know exactly what it is, that's fine. But if you see a change, you shouldn't fly until you identify it, so you know it isn't a crack in the case or something else that has changed that's about to ruin your day.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, when you do a pre-flight, don't just look at the airplane, look at the ground. Especially at night, take your flashlight and look at the ground all around the airplane as well. I've found many a fault by finding a puddle of some kind.
Yep. Well, Brian, somehow we managed to fly through another hour of Cockpit to Cowl.
I don't know how that happens. Time seems to speed up. It's just like we just sprung forward, didn't we? Speaking of spring forward, that should be our title for next month.
That is going to be our title for next forward, except we're actually going to focus on mods. I think we're going to talk about mods. We'll see.
Oh, I love that. There's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, we'll figure
I
something
just
out.
put a crate engine in my Citabria, so we need to talk about this.
Exactly. So to everybody who's watching, just another quick reminder, big thanks to Avemco. Mention SocialFlight for a 5% discount at Avemco, so check all that out. We have our Fly to Win challenge at SocialFlight. We're giving away a Lightspeed Delta Zulu headset. We are rapidly approaching the end of that. That's happening on April 1st, so if you want to do that, check out SocialFlight.com. And Thursday night, Brian, the big Schiff show.
Yep, sometimes it is a real Schiff show, but we're going to be talking about engine failure Thursday, March 12th, 7 p.m. Central Time. And you can start it anytime. If you can't start it until 7:15, you can log on at 7:15 and watch it from the beginning, just like it's a TVR. It's fantastic. But we'll be talking about preventing and identifying, and then, how to confront an engine failure, how to use ATC, how to put the deck in your favor with engine failures. And we'll be looking at a specific scenario on that as well. And not to be outdone by SocialFlight, we also have giveaways for our game show that we're producing now, and the game show is a lot of fun, and our top winners are actually winning prizes. You can play it live during the show.
Awesome. Absolutely love that. Well, Brian, it's been another fun time. So your show, again, schiffshow.tv is on this Thursday night. That is the 12th of March. We're back with SocialFlight Live on March 24th. We're going to talk about making planes go fast with the legendary Kurt Lopresti. Roy
Ooh.
Lopresti's son, who owns Lopresti Speed Merchants. I'm telling you, this is going to be fun. They take this isn't about like making racing planes. This is about all the cool cowls and mods and fairings and the things that they sell that we can all put on our planes to go faster. And he's a lot of fun. And then on March 31st, United 1175 captain, that catastrophic engine failure where an engine went a lot more than just a normal engine failure over the Pacific. Captain Benham will be on the show March 31st on SocialFlight Live. And then we are back here April 7th on Cockpit2Cowl. We're going to talk about those aircraft mods and all the fun things that you can do to your airplane.
That's awesome. I hope I can make it.
I hope you make it too. All right. Well, for SocialFlight and Cockpit2Cowl, I'm Jeff Simon. Thank you so much, and thanks to Brian. I wish you all blue skies.
Good night, everyone.